It was a quiet Thursday evening, the kind where nothing feels urgent and you finally get a moment to just be. I was sitting on the edge of our bed, my work boots still on, toes aching from the long day. The sun had already dipped behind the trees outside our window, and the house held that dusky calm, like it always did before dinner. My wife was downstairs, probably folding laundry or doing one of the dozen things she never seemed to get credit for. We'd been married 20 years. That number looks big when you write it down, but it didn't feel big until that night. We'd been through job changes, moves, money worries, family stuff, fights that lasted a few hours and some that dragged on for days. But we always came back around. We were solid, or so I thought. I remember running my hand over the comforter, noticing a loose thread. One of those small things you keep meaning to fix and never do. That's when her phone rang on the nightstand. Just a soft little buzz at first, then the vibration. It lit up the room for a second, then went dark again. Now, I'm not the kind of man who goes digging. I've never been one to snoop through drawers or check her phone. That kind of stuff always seemed beneath us. I trusted her. She had her space, and I had mine. We always said that was one of the reasons we worked. But something, call it instinct, or maybe just that gut twinge you get when your world's about to shift, made me glance at the screen. It was just a notification. A calendar reminder. Nothing flashy or suspicious at first glance. But I leaned closer. It said, 7:30 p.m., table for two, allowance. I blinked. Allowance. That name hit like a freight train. See, Allowance wasn't just a restaurant. It was our restaurant, at least in our dreams. We talked about it for years. It was the kind of place we drive past and say, one day, when we've got the time and the money. Elegant, expensive, all white linens and quiet music. The kind of place where they bring you lemon water just for sitting down and call you sir, even if you're wearing your oldest flannel. I picked up her phone. My hand was shaking, though I didn't notice it right away. I stared at the calendar entry again. There was no name attached to it. Just that reservation. Just that time. Just that place. It wasn't my birthday. It wasn't our anniversary. There hadn't been any mention of a surprise or a night out. And it sure as hell wasn't for me. I set the phone back down like it might burn me. The room suddenly felt too small, like the air had been sucked out. I could hear the sound of the dryer tumbling downstairs. Ordinary sounds that now felt foreign. My first instinct was to make excuses. Maybe it was for a friend. Maybe she was helping plan a surprise party. Maybe. My brain ran through every possible explanation like a machine program to protect what little peace I had left. But the pit in my stomach didn't go away. I walked to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. I stared at myself in the mirror. The man looking back at me looked tired. Worn. A little older than I remembered. I had crow's feet at the corners of my eyes and a streak of gray in my beard I hadn't noticed until that moment. 20 years. That's what it had earned me. I sat back down on the bed and stared at the wall. Not thinking. Just feeling. Like something big had cracked, but hadn't fallen apart yet. A pressure building in the walls. When she came upstairs a few minutes later, she smiled. Just like always. Said something about the kids, asked if I was hungry. I nodded. My voice didn't trust itself, so I let her talk. That's the thing about moments like this. They don't always come with fireworks or shouting or fists through drywall. Sometimes, it's just quiet. Just a simple, ordinary moment made extraordinary by the weight of what you now know. She didn't notice I'd seen anything. Didn't notice the way I kept watching her face, looking for signs. Didn't notice the 1,000-yard stare of a man whose world had just been tilted off-center. I went downstairs with her. Ate dinner. Listened to her talk about her day at work, the traffic, a funny thing one of her coworkers said. I smiled when she smiled, nodded when she paused, said, uh-huh, and oh yeah, right on cue. But inside, I felt something begin to break. She was humming in the shower. That low, tuneless kind of hum she did when she was in a good mood. I remember watching the steam curling out from under the bathroom door while I sat on the edge of our bed, holding her phone in my hands like it might explode. The wallpaper was still the same, a picture of our wedding rings on the Bible, taken the morning we got married. I remember that day clear as anything. Her hands trembling with excitement, her laugh echoing off the old church walls, the way her eyes welled up when I slipped that band on her finger. That photo used to mean everything to me. That moment captured what I thought was the start of forever. But now, it just looked like some cruel joke. A frozen image of a promise that had already been broken. I stared at it for a long time before I even touched the screen. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was because of the restaurant reservation. Maybe it was the way she'd been smiling more at her phone lately. turning away slightly when I walked into her room. Or maybe it was just that feeling, deep in your gut, that tells you something ain't right, even when you can't prove it yet. I don't know her passcode. I never needed to. But that night, I tried our anniversary. It didn't work. I tried our daughter's birthday. No dice. Then I tried my birthday, and just like that, I was in. That hit me harder than I expected. My birthday. Not hers. Not our wedding date. Mine. The screen opened up to a bunch of notifications. Group chats. Emails. The usual. I didn't know where to begin, so I started with the messages. And that's where the world changed. It wasn't just one man. It was a man, sure, but it was everything they'd shared over the past 6 months. Messages every day. First thing in the morning. Last thing at night. Good mornings and sweet dreams. Jokes. Little inside things. Photos. Smiley faces. Nicknames. And not the kind of nicknames you give to a friend. She called him my safe place. He called her Sunbeam. I read until my eyes blurred. I couldn't stop. Each message was like a hammer, each one driving another nail into the coffin of what I thought our life had been. There were pictures, too. Not indecent, but intimate in their own way. Coffee mugs by the window. A book she'd once told me she hated, but apparently loved enough to read with him. A goofy selfie of her in one of the sweaters I bought last Christmas, captioned, "Missing you today." I scrolled further. They talked about places they'd gone. Parks, little sandwich shops, a bookstore she always said she never had time to visit. I saw a picture of her sitting on a bench I recognized. It was just down the street from my office. They'd been meeting while I was at work. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I remember pressing my fingers into my thighs, just to remind myself I was still sitting there, still real, still alive. My chest felt tight, like something heavy was pushing down on it. I felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life, some poor fool who didn't see it coming. And maybe that's what hit the hardest. I didn't see it coming. I didn't want to believe it. I blamed myself for every distant look, every quiet dinner, every cold shoulder. I thought maybe I wasn't being supportive enough, not affectionate enough, not present enough. Turns out, I was just in the way. I looked back at the wallpaper. Our rings. That moment frozen in time. And I realized that whatever that photo meant to me, it didn't mean the same to her anymore. She was still singing, softly, behind the bathroom door. I put the phone down, not because I was done, but because I didn't want to hear her voice while I was reading her betrayal. There was something so unbearable about the sound of her humming while I sat there, trying to hold myself together. She was so normal, so casual, so clean and relaxed behind that door. Like the weight of what she'd done didn't exist. But it did. It existed in every message I just read. Every emoji. Every word she used to belong to me, now given away like they were nothing. And he knew things about her, small things. Like how she didn't like mayonnaise on her sandwiches, how she needed a blanket when watching TV, how she always picked out the tomato chunks and salsa. He shouldn't have known those things. I knew those things. That was our life. Ours. I stared down at her phone one last time before I locked it and set it gently back where I found it. I didn't delete anything. I didn't send any messages. I didn't take screenshots. I just left it sitting there on the nightstand, looking harmless again. The next morning, I woke up before her. Just like I usually did. The sky outside was still a shade of purple, not quite night, not quite day. The kind of morning where the world feels half asleep and everything's quieter than it should be. She was curled up beside me, like nothing had changed. And maybe for her, nothing had. Maybe the world was still spinning the way it always had. But mine had shifted overnight, just a few degrees, enough that I could feel it every time I took a breath. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, counting the little bumps in the plaster like they might give me some answers. They didn't. I could have confronted her right then and there. Could have shaken her awake and laid it all out. But I didn't. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't do any of the things the old me might have done. The version of me from 5 years ago would have blown the whole house apart. But that man had grown tired. No, this time. I just got up, showered, and made coffee. I even poured her a cup, just the way she liked it. 2 sugars, dash of milk. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, yawning, her hair pulled back into that lazy bun she always wore when she was off the clock. She smiled when she saw the coffee. Said, "You're spoiling me." I smiled back. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. We sat on the porch while she scrolled her phone, legs tucked under her in the old wicker chair. The sun was climbing, turning the clouds orange, and for a second, everything looked beautiful. But it wasn't. Not anymore. I watched her. Every movement. Every blink. Trying to figure out what was real and what was performance. And you know what? That might have been the worst part. Not the betrayal. Not even the lies. It was the not knowing how long it had been fake. I watched her laugh at something on her screen, and I wondered if she ever laughed like that for me anymore. Later that day, I emailed my boss. Told him I needed to take some personal time. Family stuff. Nothing serious, I said. I just needed a week. He didn't ask questions, just told me to take care of myself. I thanked him and shut the laptop. Then I sat in the garage with a cold beer and stared at the lawnmower for a good half hour. I wasn't thinking about the yard. I was thinking about how much I'd built for us. Not just the house, or the new kitchen she wanted, or the backyard I leveled by hand. I was thinking about the years. The sacrifices. The little things that never got noticed. The quiet way I carried all the weight she never saw. And now here I was, sitting in the garage like a stranger in my own life. I didn't tell anyone. Not my brother. Not my best friend. Not even my neighbor, who usually knew when I'd run out of barbecue sauce. I kept it all inside. Buttoned up. I smiled, nodded, went through the motions. She didn't notice. Over the next couple of days, I started watching her. Not in the paranoid way, but like a man documenting evidence. Not just what she said, but how she said it. The pauses. The moments she looked at her phone and smiled like a schoolgirl. The sudden errands. The quick showers after being gone longer than usual. Every puzzle piece slid into place, and it was like a picture I'd never wanted to see was forming all on its own. At night, I lay next to her in bed and listened to her breathe. I kept thinking, how can someone sound so peaceful when their whole life is built on a lie? She didn't flinch when I held her hand. She didn't twitch when I kissed her forehead goodnight. But I felt it. The distance. The hollowness where trust used to live. I started walking in the mornings. Just me, the sidewalk, and the soft sound of my boots against the pavement. I passed the same mailboxes, the same trees, the same barking dog behind the picket fence. But everything looked different now. Like someone had pulled a filter over the world. I wasn't walking to clear my head. I was walking to hold myself together. In town, I stopped by the diner, sat in the same booth I always did, ordered black coffee and dry toast. Familiar things. Simple things. The waitress asked if I was all right. I told her I was just tired. She smiled like she didn't believe me. Smart woman. When I got back home, she was in the kitchen, humming again. Making pancakes, like it was just another day in our American dream. I said, "Smells good." She looked up and smiled, like nothing was broken. But I was already on the other side. The plan didn't come to me all at once. It started slow, like a leak you don't notice until it's soaked the floorboards. I'd sit on the porch drinking coffee, or drive through town on autopilot, and the same thought would keep rolling through my head. She thinks I don't know. And maybe that was the worst part. Not just the cheating, not just the lying, but the performance. The everyday pretending. The soft smiles, the pecks on the cheek, the casual way she tossed around, "Love you," before heading out to run another errand that wasn't real. So I did something I've never done before. I started digging. Now, I'm not some tech genius. I can fix a leaky sink, I can rotate my own tires, but I don't know the first thing about digital sleuthing. So I kept it simple. I paid attention. Every time she left the house, I took note of when and where. Sometimes I followed. Far enough back not to be noticed, close enough to learn something. That's how I got his name. I found the guy she was meeting. Same man from the messages. Same face from the photos she kept saved under a locked folder on her phone. I won't bother mentioning his name here, not because I'm protecting him, but because he was never the story. He was just the crack that let the rot show. It didn't take long to find out more. His name led to his social media, which led to his job, and finally, to his wife. She was the missing piece. Her profile showed a woman who looked tired. Tired but strong, if that makes sense. She had one of those half-forced smiles that mothers wear when they're holding everything together. I studied her face like a map, not out of curiosity, but because I knew she deserved the truth. We both did. I didn't know how to contact her without coming across like some kind of lunatic. So I started simple. I made a fake account, nothing fancy, just enough to message her without it being tied to me right away. I said, "I think our spouses are involved in something. You deserve to know. If you want answers, meet me at Alohan's. This Friday, 7:30. That was it. No threats. No drama. She didn't respond for 2 days. Then, late Thursday night, she wrote back. Okay. No punctuation. No questions. Just that one word. It told me everything. She already knew. Or at least she had a gut feeling she couldn't shake. And maybe, just maybe, she was as tired of the pretending as I was. I called the Lowens the next morning. Made a reservation for 2. Requested a table in the back, near the corner window. Then I pulled up the screenshot I'd taken of my wife's calendar notification, the one she never bothered to delete. Same place. Same time. It was like she wanted to be caught. Friday came. I showered, shaved, put on a clean shirt. Not for show, not to impress, but because I wanted to feel like myself again. Like a man with his feet under him. She asked where I was going as I put my jacket on. Just out, I said, casual as you please. She nodded and went back to stirring whatever she was making for dinner, like I was heading to the hardware store. Like I wasn't about to change everything. The drive to Alohan's felt longer than usual. I passed the gas station where we used to stop for coffee on Sunday mornings. Past the little bookshop she loved but hadn't mentioned in months. Every familiar landmark felt like a scar. When I walked into the restaurant, the host gave me a smile and asked for my name. Grant, I said. Reservation for 2. He nodded, led me through the main dining room and into the back. And there she was, his wife. Already seated. Wearing a navy blouse, hair pinned back. Hands wrapped around a water glass like it might steady her. She looked up as I approached. Our eyes met. No introductions were needed. You're him, she said. And you're her, I replied. We sat. We didn't order right away. Just sat there in the low candlelight, studying each other across the table like two people trying to make sense of a jigsaw puzzle they didn't ask for. I could see she'd been crying recently. Eyes a little puffy. I imagined mine looked worse. I told her what I knew. I didn't dress it up. I didn't sugarcoat it. Just the facts, times, places, messages. She nodded as I spoke, slow and solemn, like someone ticking off items on a list she'd already half-written in her head. She pulled out her phone. Showed me a photo of him. One I hadn't seen before. One where they were together. My wife was smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in years. They're coming here, I said. She blinked. Tonight? I nodded. The clock read 7:23. We sat in silence, listening to the silverware clink softly around us. Waiting. Not for revenge. For truth. The sound of the door opening was quiet. Just a soft click behind us, the kind of noise most people wouldn't notice unless they were waiting for it. But we were. I didn't turn right away. Neither did she. We just sat there, still as stone, as the footsteps approached. I could tell the second my wife entered the room. I knew her walk. I'd spent 20 years hearing it through hallways, on staircases, down grocery store aisles. I finally looked up when I felt the stillness behind me. And there she was. She froze. Her lover stopped beside her. Confused. He looked from her to us, not understanding what this was yet. Maybe he thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he thought he could charm his way out of whatever was happening. But my wife knew better. Her face went white. We were seated at a table for 4 in a private room off the back of the restaurant. Low light, thick curtains, a vase with fresh flowers in the center. Alohan's had always prided itself on discretion, on calm. There was a quiet dignity to the space, which made the moment feel even more absurd. Like a family dinner held in a funeral home. She tried to speak, but no words came out. I gestured to the empty chairs across from us. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple motion. An invitation of sorts. Her hands were trembling as she sat. He followed suit, trying to keep up appearances. He offered a smile like he thought we might all end up laughing about this one day. His wife didn't smile back. No one spoke for a while. The waiter came in, a young man probably no older than 20. He looked between us and asked if we were ready to order. I said we'd need a few minutes. He nodded and slipped out as quickly as he came in. I turned my attention back to my wife. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I guess you know, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her lover leaned forward, trying to take control. Look, he said, I think there's been some misunderstanding. That was when her face cracked. Just for a second. She turned toward him, and I could see the panic bubbling underneath. There's no misunderstanding, I said. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of one of their messages. Not the worst one, not the most emotional, just a simple exchange about meeting here, this night, this time. I slid it across the table. His wife picked it up. Read it. Set it down. I have more, I said, calm as a man reading a weather report. But that one seemed fitting. My wife finally looked at me. Her eyes were red. Not from crying, at least, not yet. From holding everything in. I never meant for it to happen like this, she said. I almost laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. You mean in a private room? At our dream restaurant? Or behind my back for 6 months? Her mouth opened, then shut again. Her eyes darted to the man beside her. She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. You said he wouldn't find out, he hissed. I stayed quiet. I wanted them to speak. I wanted the silence to do the work. I should have known, his wife said softly. You've been distant for months. You said it was work. You said I was imagining things. He looked at her, and for a moment, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of violence. Fear of being seen. You used me, she added, louder this time. You used us. My wife was shaking now. Tears welling up, hands clenched in her lap. But I didn't offer comfort. Not this time. This isn't a scene, I said. We're not here to fight. We're here because truth deserves a seat at this table. No one had anything left to say to that. The waiter returned, hesitant. Would you like to start with drinks? I looked at the others. No one responded. Just water, I said. For all of us. He nodded, vanished again. For the next 10 minutes, we sat in silence. For people at a table built for celebration, surrounded by walls meant to hold secrets. The air was thick with things we'd all tried to ignore. The lies. The excuses. The small betrayals that had piled up like snow until the whole roof caved in. I watched her across the table, and I couldn't help but wonder when exactly she stopped being mine. Was it the first message? The first glance? Or had it been dying quietly for years while I was too busy holding everything together to notice? She finally looked at me. Really looked. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice cracked like old wood. I nodded. But sorry wasn't a patch for this kind of wound. This wasn't closure. This wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't revenge, either. It was just the truth. And it was enough. I didn't go home that night. After we left the restaurant, I walked out into the cool night air and kept walking. I don't even remember saying goodbye. I just remember the sound of my boots on the pavement and the way the wind cut across my neck. The town was quiet, the streets half empty, the sky blank. Everything felt still. Like the world had taken a deep breath and was waiting to see what I'd do next. I found a hotel off the main road, a plain 2-story place with a sign that flickered like it was just trying to hold on. The clerk didn't ask questions, just handed me a key and pointed down the hall. Room 658. That number stayed with me. The room was nothing special, 2 beds, 1 TV, a little table in the corner with a worn Bible in the drawer. The kind of place you stop for one night and forget the next morning. But that night, it felt like a safe house, somewhere the world couldn't find me. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't take my jacket off. Didn't take my boots off. I just sat there in silence, staring at the carpet like it might offer me answers. The tears came later. Not loud, not messy. Just slow and quiet, like water finding a crack in the foundation. I wasn't crying for her. I wasn't crying because I lost her. I was crying for the time, the years, the life I had poured myself into. 20 years is a long time to believe in something. A long time to build a home, raise a family, make 1,000 tiny sacrifices no one ever thanks you for. And now it all felt like a story I'd told myself, one she had quietly rewritten without me. I didn't try to call her. I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to see any messages, any half-hearted apologies or explanations. I wanted the silence. I needed it. It was nearly midnight when the knock came. At first, I thought it might be someone from the front desk. Maybe I'd forgotten to sign something. Maybe they'd given me the wrong room. But when I opened the door, it was her, his wife. The woman who had sat across from me just hours earlier, holding her own heartbreak like it was made of glass. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there with her arms crossed, eyes red but dry, like she'd already cried enough and didn't have anything left. I didn't know where else to go, she said quietly. I stepped aside, let her in. She walked in slow, like the weight of the day was hanging off her shoulders. She didn't sit, just stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot below. The light from the sign cast her in a faint yellow glow, like a memory you're not sure you can trust. You ever think you know someone, she said after a long pause, and then realized you were just convenient? I didn't answer, because I knew that feeling too well. She finally sat down in the chair by the table, pulled her coat tighter around her, and just stared at the wall. We talked for a long time. Hours, maybe. Told each other pieces of our stories. Little things we hadn't said earlier. She told me how he'd been distant since last spring, how he started working late, how he made excuses that sounded just believable enough. I told her about the coffee cups on our porch, the The way my wife smiled at her phone, the day I opened it and everything fell apart. There was a strange comfort in it. Not joy, not relief. Just the quiet knowing that someone else had felt the same kind of earthquake. We weren't comparing pain, we were naming it. At one point, she stood up and poured us both water from the plastic hotel pitcher. She handed me a cup without a word and sat back down. We drank like two people trying to wash something out of our mouths that wouldn't go away. She looked tired. Not just physically, soul tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from a lack of rest, but from carrying something too heavy for too long. Eventually, the silence stretched. Not awkward, just honest. She looked at the empty second bed, then at me. "I can't go home tonight," she said. "I just can't." I nodded. She didn't move right away. Didn't ask for permission. She just stood up, stepped around the bed, and pulled back the covers. I turned off the light. The room settled into quiet again, only now it wasn't the lonely kind. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people have run out of words, run out of anger, and all that's left is the ache of what was lost. We didn't touch it first. Just lay there. Two strangers in the same storm, trying to find some dry ground. I could hear her breathing, steady and low, and for the first time in days, mine started to match it. I didn't fall asleep quickly. I stared at the ceiling again, the same way I had the night before. But this time, I wasn't alone. We weren't fixing anything. We weren't pretending. We were just there. I came back home 2 days later. Not because I missed her. Not because I wanted to talk. I came back because it was still my house, and I was done letting her pretend otherwise. When I walked through the door, she was sitting at the kitchen table. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red like she hadn't slept. She looked up like a kid waiting for a punishment that might not come if she stayed quiet. "You didn't call," she said softly. "No," I replied, hanging my keys on the hook by the door like I always had. She stood, hesitated, then rushed to me. Arms out. Tears ready. But I stepped around her. Calm. Controlled. Every step deliberate, because I knew this was where it all came apart. She followed me into the living room, barefoot on the wood floors, begging with every word. I messed up. I know I did. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. Some truths don't need volume to hit hard. "You could have stopped the first time," I said. "You could have told me. You chose not to." She dropped to the couch like her legs had given out. I remember her hands trembling as she reached for a tissue, like covering her face would undo what she'd done. "I love you," she said through the sobs. "I never stopped loving you." That was the moment I realized she still didn't get it. "It's not about love," I said. "It's about respect. Trust. You set those on fire and expected me to keep watering the ashes." She cried harder. But crying wasn't going to fix this. She asked if we could talk to someone. A counselor. A pastor. Said we owed it to what we had. But what we had? She buried that under months of lies. I wasn't interested in digging it back up. I went upstairs, packed a small duffel, and came back down. She watched me like I was walking away from a car crash she caused but still wanted to ride home in. I told her I'd be staying at my brother's for a while. Told her she had a choice. Tell the truth, or I would. She didn't answer. Just sat there, tears soaking into the sleeves of a sweater I'd bought her last Christmas. I kept my word. That week, I told her parents. They were shocked at first. Her mom cried. Her dad clenched his jaw like he was fighting every urge to yell. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them straight. Their daughter had been seeing another man behind my back for half a year. Then I told her friends. The ones who smiled at me at cookouts. The ones who knew we'd been together since our 20s. I didn't blast it on some group message. I spoke one by one. And every time, I saw the same expression. Sadness, surprise, and that flicker of knowing something hadn't felt right for a while. I told her boss, too. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. She and her lover worked at the same company, and I had a feeling the truth would show up there soon anyway. I figured it was better they heard it from me than from gossip around the copier. She called me that night, voice raw and cracking. She asked how I could do this to her. Said I was ruining her life. No, I told her. You did that. I just stopped hiding it. And then I filed. It felt surreal, holding those papers in my hands. Black ink on white paper, like 20 years could be itemized and stamped. I signed my name without hesitation. Her lover didn't take it well. According to what I heard, his home life crumbled. His wife moved out, took the kids, and left him in a half-furnished apartment. She even spoke to his manager about him, about his behavior, about everything. That was her call, not mine. And she didn't stop there. One night, About a week after the papers were filed, she sent me a short message. He knows about us now. I told him. I read those words 3 times. I didn't ask what she told him exactly. I didn't need to. There was a quiet finality to it. A line drawn in permanent marker. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little sick over it. Not regret, just the strange weight of it all. That in the wreckage of 2 marriages, we'd found this strange, broken closeness neither of us asked for. But that moment was hers to carry, just like the fallout was mine. By the end of that week, she stopped calling. No more voicemails. No more texts. Just silence. And in that silence, for the first time in a long time, I could finally hear myself think. I moved into a small rental on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, faded siding, and a crooked mailbox that leaned like it was tired of standing straight. The backyard backed up to a patch of woods, and when the wind blew through the trees just right, it sounded like the ocean. I started fixing the place up bit by bit. Paint here. New faucet there. Not because I needed to, but because using my hands helped me remember I was still here. She and I, his wife. We didn't plan on staying in each other's lives. At first, we were just 2 people who had fallen through the same rotten floorboard. But we kept checking in. A text here. A coffee there. No pressure. Just quiet companionship. Her name was June. I liked that name. It felt warm. Kind. Like sunlight through blinds on a slow morning. June and I talked about everything but them. We talked about how our kids were doing, how it felt to sleep alone again, how strange it was to buy groceries for one. We found a kind of rhythm in our pain, like 2 people walking with a limp but still keeping pace. We'd meet at this little park near the edge of town. There was a bench under an old oak tree, the kind that's seen more than its share of tears and laughter. Sometimes we'd sit there and just watch the wind scatter the leaves, not saying much. And sometimes we'd talk until the sky turned dark and the mosquitoes started biting. There was never any need to explain the silence. It belonged to both of us. After a few months, we started cooking dinner together once or twice a week. Nothing fancy. Soup, sandwiches, roasted chicken when we felt ambitious. We'd sit at her kitchen table with mismatched plates and cheap wine, and it felt more honest than any dinner I'd had in years. One night, I fixed her porch light. Another night, she brought me a casserole and left it on my porch with a sticky note that said, "For the days that feel heavier than others." It wasn't love, not right away. It was something softer, something cautious. Like picking up a bird with a broken wing, you handle it gently because you know how easy it is to hurt something that's already hurting. Meanwhile, my ex faded into the background. She moved out of our house, left town not long after the divorce finalized. I didn't chase her. Didn't ask where she went. She left behind some boxes, old photos, a couple of cookbooks, a scarf I bought her once at a flea market. I put them in the garage and never opened them. A year passed. One Sunday, I was walking through the farmer's market when I saw her. My ex. She was standing near the flower stall, holding a bundle of sunflowers. Her hair was shorter, and she looked thinner, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with time. She saw me, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward. "Hi," she said. Her voice cracked. "Hey," I said, hands in my pockets. We stood in the middle of that busy walkway, surrounded by chatter and fresh produce and kids with balloons, and it was like the whole world had narrowed to just us. She started crying. Right there. No warning, no build-up. Just tears sliding down her cheeks like she'd been holding them back for a year. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was so wrong." I didn't say anything. Not at first. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw someone I used to know, someone I'd built a life with, and someone who had thrown it all away. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not like before. "I know," I said. "I forgave you a long time ago." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and gave me a sad little smile. "Are you happy?" she asked. I thought of June. Of quiet dinners and porch lights. Of the way we'd sit under the oak tree and just exist without pretending. "Yeah," I said. "I'm getting there." We didn't hug. Didn't make promises. We just stood there for another moment, then walked away in different directions. Back at home, June was sitting on my porch with 2 coffees and a bag of donuts from that place she liked on Main Street. She looked up, smiled that small smile of hers, and scooted over to make room. I sat down beside her. We didn't talk about the market. We didn't need to. She handed me a cup, warm and steady. And we sat there, side by side, 2 people still healing, still learning how to live honestly, one slow, quiet day at a time. Share your thoughts in the comments. Did the private dinner reveal more than a public argument would have? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel, and give us a like.